Andy Baker. I'm the CEO and founder of Sesimi. We're a content automation platform. Here with AJ and Joe today to talk about leveraging AI and how to drive growth. We've heard from a lot of brand and retail marketers over the last couple of days. We've heard from a lot of social influencers. We've heard a lot about challenges in content marketing across a whole raft of different brands. I think what's really interesting about this session is we are yet to hear from a performance marketer, right? I think that's really, and this is pun intended, this is exactly where the rubber hits the road. And so with that in mind, I'd love AJ and Joe to give us a little bit of an introduction about who they are, where they come from, and their specific roles in each of their organizations.
Hi, I'm AJ Magali. I'm the head of performance for Cadillac. As far as performance marketing is concerned, I feel like our jobs change every day. Yeah, so we wear like 15 different hats as performance marketers. Like one day it's like, hey, where's my conversions? The other day it's like, how come nobody knows about our brand? It's different hats every day.
And when things go wrong, people always come back to performance marketing, right? Like the ads aren't working.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, Joe Saia, Director of Performance Marketing for Chevrolet, and background in retail marketing. I'm from the Northeast, and I agree with you, AJ, that performance marketing, it's kind of like connecting all the pieces across a bunch of different areas. And fundamentally, you know, people come to us and say, like, how much money did you make me, right? And I gave you this much money. How much money did you help me make? And that's not always an easy question to answer nowadays, right? But that's something we got to do, and we got to dig into the data and use AI, right, to really tell better stories there. So it's a really great job. It's a really fun job. But AI is certainly changing the way we do things in more ways than one.
I think getting into the session proper, what I'd love to sort of understand from you guys is, what do you see as being the major challenges in the automotive space as it pertains to leveraging AI, driving performance marketing? I mean, you don't have to not be interested in cars to understand that there's a raft of new brands and challenges in the market. Lucid Motors, Rivian here, who's a sponsor of South by Southwest. There's Slate coming out of Amazon, so on and so forth. So what do you guys see as being the major challenges in the automotive space when it comes to advertising and leveraging AI?
I mean, from a challenges standpoint, there's a lot right now. So you got to think about, you have market changes. We have macroeconomic problems that we kind of have to deal with. There's constant prices going up for vehicles. There's you have so many choices now as far as vehicles are concerned. There's so many choices for us from an EV standpoint. How do we stand out? And then also having to deal with not having the tax credit present from an EV standpoint. That's a really, really big challenge for us. So we really need to make sure that like we're hitting people at every stage of the journey as often as possible, but also making sure that they understand what the products are. They understand like why they should be shopping with us as opposed to somebody else. It's a lot of different challenges happening right now. It's all happening at the same time.
Totally agree. I think much has been written about the transition from ICE vehicles to EV vehicles, right? And the timeline of that and how bumpy that is or is not. And it kind of obscures the fact that the EV buyer has a totally different journey, right? They spend a lot more time researching than your typical car buyer. And then you add in AI on top of that, right? Where the places they're going to find information totally different than it was 2 or 3 years ago, right? So it really results in a very complex journey, very complex buyer profile. It makes it a lot harder to make sure that our brands are top of mind and that we're getting that sale.
Yeah, I think you touched on it, or both of you touched on this perfectly. The buyer journey in the EV landscape is a much longer one. We're not talking about someone coming into, I don't know, Sephora and picking up a new mascara just because on a whim. We're not talking about someone walking through 7-Eleven and buying a can of Pepsi because they're thirsty and it's an instant decision. Buying a vehicle is probably the second most expensive thing that you are going to buy in your life outside of your home mortgage, or unless you're a trust fund baby and you get given it. But fundamentally, that buyer journey is really, really long. And so how do you as performance marketers think about showing up at that moment that really, really matters? Like they've gone through the 3 months of researching. They know every single EV vehicle in market. How do you hit them at exactly the right time?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me is consistency. So going up from, you just talked about like the AI journey, right? We just recently did an audit a couple of months ago that kind of showed like from a branded and a non-branded AI prompt, it's completely two different sources that they're pulling from. Like if you're dealing with like a non-branded prompt, you have to deal with all of the different publishers that are out there. You have to talk about like all the blogs and all the YouTube influencers that are kind of talking about what's the hottest brands that are out there. And then when you're looking at it from a brand point of view, you have like your own inventory. So you have your website, you have all of the dealer websites. There's a certain level of consistency and coordination that you need to do across both so that you're hitting it, not necessarily like consistent in the way that like your messaging is the same, but consistent in your ability to appear at every single part of the journey. I think that's the biggest challenge that like Joe and I face basically on a daily basis. Like, if my wife kind of jokes about this all the time, like, how did you break AI today? Like, that's normally my day, is how, like, or how often I'm on Reddit nowadays, because like we need to make sure that the content is as accurate as possible. Like, a lot of those things are now in picture for us, and like things that we wouldn't have thought about. Like before, it was just like organic search or paid search that we had to kind of worry about. Now it's like, okay, now I need to think about how the LLMs are going to pull this product when they're comparing like what car has the best mileage, for example. How do we translate that? Is the information they're pulling from accurate? If it's not, then okay, how do I talk to my communications team about it? That's why I was kind of joking about like the different roles that we have to play. We're basically like quarterbacking across all the channels and like marketing and communications sort of to a certain degree, and trying to figure out like how do we maintain a certain level of consistency on what they know about us.
I agree. You got to be consistent and you got to be compelling, right?
Yeah.
That's doing those things consistently and well over time is not easy, right? You have to have a brand story that's really clear and crisp and differentiated, and you need to tell that story in a way that is consistent across, an incredible number of touch points, right? And frankly, it's leading to the brand teams, the performance teams, and the comms teams really working closer together than ever, right? And really making sure we're telling that story in a really compelling way, in a way that's unmissable, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to go off piece to here a little bit, and this is not a question I pre-gave you guys, so bear with us.
You should have given us the tequila this morning.
Definitely should have given you a hard seltzer. So in the automotive landscape, you have an enormous amount of consumer data, right? You have buyer profiles, leasing profiles, service profiles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got this never-ending stream of new products and different trim levels, so like different color codes, different snorkel arrangements on SUVs, et cetera. How do you guys think about that from a consistency standpoint when you're trying to do this performance marketing? And I guess for the audience, how are you leveraging AI to do that?
Yeah. So you want to?
Yeah, I'll start. You can build off what I'll say. I think, AI is kind of built for this problem in many ways, right? We're building agents based on our brand standards, based on our reporting needs, based on our customer data, based on our audience profiles, and we're constantly refining those agents to help us create content faster, right? Which is really fascinating and really interesting, right? With that comes challenges, right? Because you have to make sure the output is kind of compliant, clear, compelling, right? You don't want to put AI slop out there, right? But it does, AI helps you kind of stitch together a lot of those disparate things that used to take months to kind of comb through. Now you can do it in a week, right? And really, it speeds up the velocity, right? We're not quite like DTC brands where we're not doing like thousands of videos a day on TikTok, right? But we are at a point now where we're doing, hundreds of variants in social platforms, and kind of seeing what works, right? Seeing what resonates, what gets more delivery, what gets more funding, and then we're kind of piping that back into our customer insights engine to make sure we're just hitting those most compelling points over and over.
Yeah, I can double down on that too. I'd like, more importantly, we're like Joe alluded to the agents. I think it's more important to go under what the knowledge base is that powers those agents. We have a really, really good, very strong like research team. We have a very strong team that like all of our sales data kind of goes into. So, and there are things that we do from like a demand space standpoint to try to identify nameplate by nameplate, what's the personality that works right, or like what's the type of person we should be going after from a targeting standpoint. That being said, like it's really important having somebody there to help build the marketing team's foundational items, that knowledge base, mostly because nobody has it right, in my opinion, and it's so much information that you need to pull in. Like, and to Joe's point, you need to constantly test and learn everything and make sure that it's as compliant as possible from a brand visual guideline. Everything is as correct as possible, and that's like a constant learning curve for us right now. We're currently like getting to a place, like one of the things we're pushing for is, as people see like what creative works, let's say on like paid social or something, can we then find nuances within that ad to pull back to the knowledge base so that it can create more assets that work? So those are like the kind of things always in action, but like it's so much work that you have to do.
And just with respect to the MarTech stack that surrounds all of that awesome work that you're doing, Like, where do you see that living? Is that something that is internalized and housed within, Cadillac or Chevrolet in this instance, or does it live with your agencies, or does it live with third parties that are trusted partners? And where do you see the intersection between that AI and that? And you touched on it.
Yep.
It still needs that human oversight. So I'd love to get your thoughts for the audience around that.
I mean, that's the answer to that question changes by the week, right? Because these technologies are moving so quickly, right? I think fundamentally we believe that we got to own the customer relationship and the data, right? And that often when it comes to AI means owning a lot of the tooling around it, right? Because it is so intertwined, right? But we rely on agencies, we work with partner teams, we work with creators, we work with influencers to make sure we're getting as much as possible from these tools, right? But at the end of the day, in auto, right, brand is everything, right? And the trust that our brands have is the most valuable thing we have, right? So in order to really make sure we're shepherding that into the brave new AI future, right, we have to retain a pretty good amount of control over that, right, and over those tools and that data.
Yeah, and so for those of you not so familiar with the automotive marketing ecosystem, Tier 1 is national brand and retail advertising content. Tier 2 is regional state-based advertising content. And then these guys have the added complexity of having to control thousands of dealers. So I'm really interested about how you guys think about controlling the narrative, particularly when you've gone to the effort of doing all the hard work around the strategic thinking, the creative execution. Then you guys have gone and done the hard work around making sure that people are coming onto the platforms, researching the product, buying the product ultimately. And then you've got these, I'm going to describe them as loose cannons, thousands of marketers across their ecosystem creating content. How do you handle that in an AI-driven world?
Ask very nicely and hope they go with it. In reality, like nobody has it correct at the moment. Like I would be a fool to say that like we have it completely figured out. We do have really good brand guidelines that we go by that kind of goes through from a tier 1 standpoint all the way down to tier 3. That kind of gives us that level of consistency that I was talking about earlier. But really for us, it's about cultivating a really, really good relationship all the way down to like, we have a really strong dealer summit. We have like a dealer council that like we constantly give feedback to, and it's a very strong relationship.
But would you leverage the tools or the MarTech stack that you have and deliver that down into tier 3, or is that very much controlled at your level?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, no, we definitely need to use the tooling built into our MarTech stack to drive greater consistency at both the tier 1 and tier 3 levels, right? Because fundamentally, a lot of what our customers see is coming from our tier 3 dealer partners, right? Like that is a huge customer touch point. So we need to, automate some of that, right? But I agree with AJ that like a lot of it is relationships and training and partnership, right? We talk to dealers all the time. They're great partners, right? And they want to learn. They want to understand what we're doing with AI, how we're being more consistent, how we're testing things, how they can help us show up in geo search, right? So they're great partners, and I think a lot of it is training, experimenting, knowledge sharing. Like the other week, we actually had a little bit of a hackathon at Chevy, right, where we actually locked like 15 people in a room, some of the people from the tier 3 team as well, and said, hey, let's get hands-on with all these AI tools and see what we can build, see what we can create, right? And it was a pretty great way to kind of build up that muscle over the org.
Yeah. And so when you're implementing a MarTech stack that has these AI implications or these attributions, how do you think about taking the internal business on the journey of, hey guys, we want to implement this new AI tool? I'm sure the question always comes back, where's the ROI? How do you think about it? Love for you to give the audience a bit of exposure into maybe what that journey looks like in organizations like yours, but more importantly, how do you get it over the line?
That's the first question we're asked is how much more money are we going to make, or how much are you going to save us, right? Literally, that is a very relevant question. I think, part of it is, again, being very clear with what AI can and can't do, right? We believe the human still needs to stay in the loop, right? Really, at the end of the day, this isn't about automating away all of our marketers. Our marketers understand our brand, understand what our customers need, right? And the AI tools are about giving them more leverage, right? And giving them the ability to help us grow a lot faster, right? And I think often it's really about being very clear and precise about quantifying what it can do, right? So we often show how AI can help us grow, not necessarily how it can help us cost cut, right? Because you can't grow if you just kind of cost cut and automate to the bottom, right? Race to the bottom type of thing, right? These AI tools, whether it's AI creative, AI targeting, AI audience, or AI analytics, they could just help you iterate much faster, which helps you get to the right customer much faster, which helps you drive that next sale much faster. So.
Yeah, the cool thing too is that like we have a really robust test and learn team. So everything that we do, especially from like an AI standpoint, goes through our test and learn team, which like we'll measure it through reporting, we'll measure it through conversion rates and all of that to make sure that like, hey, you're talking about like what's the return here? Here's what the expected long-term return looks like from an standpoint. Here's the short-term you're going to get from a leads conversion standpoint. Here's what we think. And then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But then the moment that we find out that this thing actually could be something, it then becomes part of our regular optimizations.
Yeah. And do you have any really good case examples that maybe you could talk about specifically around a product or a particular campaign where you guys have leveraged AI and really driven out that growth message?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we, like many brands, are experimenting with creative at scale, right? Yeah. Oh, AI tools can help you churn out thousands of ads in a week. Great, sounds awesome. And it's true, but in auto, it's not as simple as that, because you need to be really clear and specific about the message you're putting out to market. It turns out rendering cars with AI, very hard. AIs like to hallucinate things. So you ask a model to make you a picture of a Silverado, like the mirror will be wrong, like it'll be missing like the gas cover, like the wheels will be wrong.
Drivers on the wrong side.
Drivers on the wrong side, like it's all kinds of weird stuff, right? So that was actually a really big challenge we recently overcame, where we started mass versioning creative for some of our EVs specifically, right? Where we use tools that we built in-house to generate hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of variations with many different messages and calls to action, try to see what worked, right? We thought it would take us a month to build all that creative and hopefully deploy it. Took a little longer than that, right? Because we wanted to make sure that it was on brand, it was accurate, it didn't look fake, right? Because we don't want to put fake stuff into the world, right? Because that undermines our brand, right? It undermines the strength that we built out over 100 plus years at Chevy in particular. So coming out of that, though, what we learned was, though it took us a little longer than we anticipated, the benefits from a growth and KPI standpoint were substantial, right? Because you were able to mass version messaging such that, in a previous life, we'd do a shoot, we'd have 5 messages, it would be dependability, fuel economy, and safety, and that was it, right? With AI, we can do 20 different messages, right? And serve, a fuel economy message to this person, and a dependability message to this person, and a, tech message to that person. And that just wasn't possible before. And that showed up in the KPIs, which is really, really cool.
Cadillac's a little bit very similar to what Joe's doing right now. It's a little bit more different for us because the number one complaint I get from dealers is, hey, you always create these assets. Like, I live in Dallas, Texas, and I have to deal with all of these electric cars on the Pacific Coast Highway. It just doesn't resonate with me. It's not for me. So we started telling them, okay, we'll make the same kind of deal with increased permeations of advertising, but it's going to be centered on a regional basis. And our hypothesis was that, are we going to be able to get better performance from those regions by flooding them with content that's very relevant to their surrounding areas? And that's what we're trying to currently do right now. We just launched that campaign. And to Joe's point, like making sure that the images are rendering properly, making sure that the backgrounds, sometimes when you get humans in the thing, it doesn't look quite right. Like, a lot of that still needs to get done. And like, it's one of those things where it's like much simpler said than done. But when you finally get the learnings of where you are right now and you see how well it's kind of going, that's where I'm pushing more for like, okay, what did we learn about here from an image standpoint that we can then feed back to the knowledge base so that it can create us more images, right? And keep that constantly going.
Yeah. And so where do you see in that workflow of creation into production, into distribution, where do you see the most benefit? Is it in the reducing the lead times on the creative aspect? Is it in the being able to do highly personalized content? Is it being able to do highly targeted distribution and serving of ad content?
A little bit of all of the above, right?
That's not an answer. Come on, give us exactly
me,
where
it's actually the big thing for me is product accuracy and speed to market. That's what the two things I care about, especially because if we can't be quick about something, especially with the learnings that we have, we're already one step behind. So that's the one that's really helped us out. Now, I'm not going to say that we have it 100% perfect, but we do have an amazing brand visual ID team that kind of like looks and nitpicks every single one of our ads and says like, okay, this doesn't look like our brand guidelines. The cars don't look properly. It's not rendering right. So, but that's like the most important savings that I've gotten so far.
Yeah, I think everyone thinks it's going to be creative, right? And I think it's getting there, right? Very, very, very quickly. I actually think the best benefits of the current AI tools we have are really on the analytics side, honestly, because these models are so good at taking like unstructured quantitative data and just immediately spitting out a takeaway, right? So you can give it all of your raw performance data, and work that took an analyst a week or two to really extract can be done much, much quicker. And that can then feed back into better creative or better briefing or better targeting. So I actually think the analytics side is personally where I'm seeing the most benefit right now.
And I feed them all of Joe's emails. So I know, like, hey, make this sound like Joe when I came up with an email. And it spits out all the details with the insights and everything. And I'm like, okay, I sound smart. Great.
I like that. Get Joe in trouble.
Yep.
It's perfect. And so with respect to the tools themselves, we touched on it before, and to the extent that you can, like, I'd love to give the audience a bit of insight into the types of tools that organizations like you are actually using in this space, unless they're proprietary and you can't really talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, so we're using all the models that are out there publicly, right? And we work with our agencies to build kind of like bespoke custom tools, right? Specifically, right? Because as I mentioned, rendering a car is really hard. If you went to Nano Banana today and asked it to render a Silverado or an Equinox EV or a Lyric, right, it would look right, but kind of weird and uncanny, right? And it just would not be fit for
Chevy Toyota.
Yeah, Chevy Toyota, literally, right? So we work with our agencies to build these like bespoke tools that are trained on our brand voices, that are trained on accurate, CGI data, right? To make sure that we kind of condense that timeline, right? And then we're building a bunch of in-house analytics tools in particular.
I think that's really interesting. I think there's this misnomer or misconception that just because you have the tool, you are going to be able to drive it correctly. So what I'm picking up from you, Joe, and jump in, AJ, if you'd like, you have these tools, but they are very highly specialized and tuned depending on whether it's trying to tie data into a personalization message or whether it's into particular vehicle specs or things like that. Is that true in your world?
No, that's very accurate. And there's always going to be somebody that needs to be there to quality control all of that data. Like, that's the part I like stress every time like people talk about like savings of AI, so to speak. But at the end of the day, somebody still needs to be there to make sure that from a visual ID standpoint, from a data quality standpoint, we have multiple engineers that are currently looking at like all of our reporting, making sure it's as correct as possible. Like, so you need to feed the fire as much as possible.
So we don't have AI checking on AI checking on AI?
No.
Not yet. No.
Not yet.
Yeah, I just think, again, that I talk about trust. I've said the word trust like 5 times because it's true, right? It's really important now. Our brand, the trust we have in our brand is critical. The trust that our partners within GM have in us and what we're doing is extremely, extremely important, right? So working really, really closely with partners in brand and finance and analytics and sales, right, to make sure that they understand what we're doing, have faith in what we're doing, right? Because otherwise it can seem like AI wizardry, like it's going to solve all our problems, and it'll really help us grow and help us, serve our customers better. But it's got to be right, it's got to be accurate, it's got to be documented. And when someone asks me, did it make us money? We have to be able to like point back to the source, right? And it can't be an AI said, an AI said, an AI said. So I need to be able to say that story clearly.
So just quickly, because Peyton from Brand Innovators has given us the wind up. I was going to ask a question around where do you see AI being in 3 to 5 years, and what would be the problem that's solved next that would really benefit you? But the reality is 3 to 5 years is a ridiculous timeline to ask. It's like, what would be the next thing that they could solve in your universe that would make a difference?
I mean, for me, it's a data insights thing. Making sure that like we're trying very hard to put sales data, inventory, and all of those things in one place, so that like when we're trying to diagnose problems that's happening in the market right now, we can try to use AI to like kind of just spit out like, hey, give me a rundown of what's happening here. Can we pinpoint where the issues are currently? What's the problem that I need to solve next? I think that's the part where it becomes really, really important for me.
Yeah, I think over the 5-year time horizon, which is like God knows what's going to be in 5 years, I do think there's going to be a world where a briefing agent is talking to a strategy agent, that is talking to a creative agent, that is talking to a deployment agent, right? Like, we're going to get there eventually. And I just think the hardest challenge will be, how do you make sure the human has oversight into that whole process and can quality control and can make sure that it's representing our brand the way we want it to. But again, 5 years, long time, but I think we'll get there.
Amazing. Been a great audience. AJ has the best fit in automotive. Do we not agree?
Yes.
And just want to thank Joe as well for his time.